One question I've been asked with laser image transfers is when should I mask or block part of an image and what actually happens if I don't? Conveniently, this week's Art Heart Academy challenge prompt is symmetry, so I've decided to combine the two. I'm creating a mirrored laser image transfer, but I'm also going to deliberately mask some parts of the image while leaving other parts completely exposed. That way, by the end of the print, we can see the difference within the exact same piece. Because apparently one of me wasn't enough, I'm starting with a mirrored photograph of myself from a few years back. For the first transfer, I'm rolling out a very thin layer of Amsterdam black oxide acrylic. When I say thin, I mean thin. As you can see, I initially interpreted thin rather generously, so I'm rolling some of that paint back off onto a scrap piece of paper that I actually saved these and can use them for collage or other projects. So for the image, I took an old photograph of me, since I rarely, offend myself, and used Photoshop to create the mirrored version to give me the symmetry for the challenge. It also gives me several different areas where I can test what happens during the next transfer. I did use an alignment guide here underneath the plate or alongside the plate, simply because I want the photograph reasonably straight. This is not a multi-layer tonal transfer, so precise registrations is not really important. I just don't want one version of me noticeably higher than the other. This is an older 8x10 Jelly Arts plate, and I keep it on a clear plastic backing sheet. That way I can pick it up and check the transfer as I work if I want to. I've applied good pressure across the image and then peeled the paper away to reveal the first black transfer. Now the important part of the experiment, I've cut symmetrical pieces of paper that I'm going to use as masks for around my faces and hands. Those are the areas I'm wanting to protect during the next laser transfer. The question of whether you should mask an area doesn't really have one universal answer. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But here's what masking will change. When I cover the hands and faces, I'm preventing that next paint and transfer layer from directly contacting those areas. Everything else stays exposed. So this is my control group in this experiment, while the jackets and parts of my hair and other exposed areas can participate in whatever chaos comes next. For this piece, that's exactly what I'm wanting. For my second laser image, I'm using repeated text from an Alanis Morissette song. The song is Joining You, and there's a line from that song that says, "Question mightily and find God." That has stuck with me since the 90s. I'm not entirely sure why certain sentences or phrases have lodged in my brain for 30 years, but apparently this one has signed a long-term lease. So the text is repeated across the entire sheet and printed with my laser printer. I did spray all laser images with acrylic or photo varnish, and I'll include the product information in the description. And I'm using a thin layer of acrylic paint here. It's turquoise. It's a turquoise shade, and it's a Liquitex paint. Again, I'm using the registration guide here just solely because I want the wording to be approximately, level across. I'm going to burnish this. Now, depending upon how much pressure that you add to areas, you can remove additional paint. So the amount of lifting can vary on many things. Besides the amount of pressure that you're using when you're burnishing, it can also depend on how much paint that you have put down, as well as how dry the earlier layer is. When I peel this transfer away, one of the paper masks actually comes along for the ride. Not part of the demonstration, but it's committed apparently. More importantly, look at what's happening throughout the original black image. In the areas that I didn't mask, portions of that first transfer have been disturbed or lifted during the second laser transfer. You can especially see that well in the jacket area. All of this is exactly why masking can be useful. If there's a specific part of your first image that you're really wanting to preserve, then you want to block it or mask it. You can also add paint over it to help preserve it. Now, if you're comfortable allowing the next transfer to disturb the earlier layer, then leave it exposed. Neither one is automatically better. I'm sorry I forgot to hit record when I used a gold acrylic metal paint on a sponge just to give it that background to look a little bit more, have more shimmer and look more aged. Okay. Now, I didn't want to keep on adding layers just because you can, because at some point in time you have to stop giving that gel plate, additional responsibilities. And so I'm ready for the final pull here. I'm using a parchment colored acrylic from Liquitex, and I'm rolling out a very thin layer across the entire plate. It may look like there's not enough paint here, but there really is, because too much paint in the pull layer can either obscure some details or can actually leave some of the original print behind on your plate because it didn't dry all the way through. I'm using a wet strengthened tea bag paper for the pull. I really like this material for a lot of general gel transfer pulling. I may eventually do a separate video sometime comparing different types of papers that I use. But this wet strengthened tea bag paper has two different sides, and one feels slightly rough, like a tea bag, and the other side is more like wax paper. I put the rougher side down against the wet paint. Now, the book here does the heavy lifting. Well, not really lifting, but it's it's developed a second career as printing equipment here because it helps keep everything way down for good contact. And now for the pull. If your paper's sticking a little in places, just don't rush it. Work slowly to let it release from the plate. But here is the final product. I'm really liking how this one turned out with that little metallic shimmer from the gold and that repeated text breaking through the portrait. Most importantly, for this experiment, you can clearly see the differences between the areas that were masked and those that were left exposed. And I like both effects here. Masking isn't necessarily something that you always should do or shouldn't do. It's just a tool in your tool belt. For the finished piece, I did trim this and put it into my sketchbook. And I think that this completes the whole symmetry piece for the challenge, and as well gives you a useful side-by-side example of masking and what it can do with multiple laser transfers. Until next time, have a great day, and thanks for watching.